For many believers, prayer is the most sacred act of faith. It is where hope meets heaven, where weakness reaches for strength, where humanity dares to speak to God. From childhood, many Christians are taught how to pray, what words to use, what posture to take, how to ask, how to wait. Prayer becomes familiar, even routine, yet there is a quiet, unsettling question that many sincere believers carry in their hearts but rarely say out loud. Why does it seem like my prayers sound so different from Jesus' prayers? We pray for miracles, but Jesus spoke before miracles. We plead, but he proclaimed. We beg God to move, but he thanked God before anything changed. And that tension invites a deeper look, one that may reveal a prayer Jesus consistently used before his miracles, a prayer hidden in plain sight, a prayer the modern church rarely explains. When Jesus walked the earth, he did not perform miracles randomly or casually. The Gospels show that his miracles were deliberate, purposeful, and deeply connected to his relationship with the Father. They were not displays of power for power's sake, nor were they desperate attempts to force God's hand. Instead, they flowed from intimacy, obedience, and confidence. And before many of his most profound miracles, Jesus prayed, not in panic, not in uncertainty, but in assurance. This matters, because if we want to understand how Jesus lived and ministered, we must pay attention not only to what he did, but to how he prayed. One of the most striking examples occurs just before Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. The stone has sealed the tomb. Martha is grieving. Mary is weeping. The crowd is watching. If ever there was a moment for desperation, this was it. Yet when Jesus prays, his words are unexpected. He lifts his eyes and says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me." This prayer is astonishing. Jesus does not ask the Father to hear him. He thanks the Father for hearing him. He does not plead for power. He acknowledges relationship. He does not question whether God will act. He speaks as if the outcome is already settled. This prayer reveals something deeply important about how Jesus understood prayer. For him, prayer was not primarily about asking God to do something new, but about aligning himself with what the Father was already willing and ready to do. Jesus did not use prayer to persuade God. He used prayer to express communion with God. That distinction alone changes everything. It challenges the way many Christians approach prayer today, often treating it as a last resort rather than a place of confidence. Before the miracle happens, before Lazarus walks out of the tomb, Jesus gives thanks. Gratitude comes before resurrection. Thanksgiving comes before visible change. This is not accidental. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus consistently gives thanks before miracles occur. When he feeds the 5,000, he takes the loaves and fishes and gives thanks before multiplying them. When he breaks bread, he blesses it before distributing it. When he stands before impossible situations, he does not beg God to intervene. He acknowledges God's presence and provision first. This pattern suggests a prayer posture that many believers have never been taught. The prayer Jesus prayed was not rooted in uncertainty, but in assurance. It was not driven by fear, but by faith. It was not about convincing God, but about expressing trust in who God already is. Jesus prayed from intimacy, not insecurity, from sonship, not servitude, from relationship, not ritual. This does not mean Jesus never asked God for anything. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he asked that the cup might pass from him, but even there, his prayer ended with surrender, not anxiety. "Not my will, but yours be done." Even in anguish, his confidence in the Father never wavered. That consistency reveals something vital. Jesus' prayers flowed from a deep, unwavering belief that the Father was always attentive, always near, always good. Many Christians today pray as though God must be convinced to listen. There is an unspoken fear that unless the right words are spoken, unless enough emotion is shown, unless enough faith is demonstrated, God might remain distant. But Jesus' prayers dismantle that fear. His words before miracles assume God's attentiveness as a given. He does not pray to awaken God's interest. He prays because he already knows the Father is present. This is where the modern church may have unintentionally missed something important. In emphasizing humility, reverence, and submission, which are essential, the church has sometimes downplayed confidence, assurance, and relational authority. Many believers are taught to pray cautiously, carefully, even timidly, as though bold faith might cross into presumption. Yet Jesus prayed boldly, not because he was presumptuous, but because he was secure in his relationship with the Father. This security did not come from status alone, it came from intimacy. Jesus spent time with the Father. He withdrew to pray, not to perform, but to commune. His public miracles were rooted in private prayer. His authority flowed from obedience. His confidence came from closeness. That is why his prayers sound so different from ours. He knew the Father intimately, and that intimacy shaped the way he spoke. When Jesus said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me," he was not performing for the crowd. He even said that he spoke those words for their sake, so they would believe. His prayer was not about informing God, but about revealing something to those watching. He wanted them to understand that what was about to happen flowed from relationship, not magic, from faith, not formula. This has profound implications for how believers pray today. If prayer is primarily relational, then its effectiveness is not measured by eloquence, length, or intensity, but by trust. Jesus' prayers were simple, direct, and confident. He did not repeat himself endlessly. He did not manipulate emotion. He did not doubt whether God would respond. He prayed as a son speaking to a father who was already listening. Many Christians have been taught to pray as though God is distant, busy, or reluctant. But Jesus reveals a God who is near, attentive, and willing. The prayer Jesus prayed before miracles reflects that truth. It is a prayer that begins with gratitude, assumes God's presence, and rests in confidence. It is not a prayer of denial or false positivity. It does not ignore pain or suffering. Jesus wept at Lazarus' tomb. He felt the weight of grief. Yet even in sorrow, his trust in the Father remained unshaken. This balance is critical. The prayer Jesus prayed does not deny reality. It transcends it. It acknowledges pain without surrendering to despair. It recognizes difficulty without doubting God's goodness. It is faith that looks directly at the impossible and still gives thanks, not because the situation is easy, but because God is faithful. For many believers, this kind of prayer feels foreign. It can even feel uncomfortable. Giving thanks before seeing change can feel risky. Speaking with confidence when circumstances are bleak can feel foolish. Yet Jesus modeled this posture repeatedly. He lived as though God's will was not a question mark, but a certainty. He trusted the Father completely, even when obedience led to suffering. The church has often focused on the mechanics of prayer, how often to pray, where to pray, what words to use. These things matter, but they are secondary. The heart of prayer, as Jesus demonstrated, is relationship. Without relationship, prayer becomes ritual. With relationship, prayer becomes communion. This may explain why so many believers feel disconnected in prayer. They pray faithfully, yet feel unheard. They ask sincerely, yet see little change. It is not because God is absent, but because prayer has been reduced to a transaction rather than a relationship. Jesus did not pray to get things from God. He prayed because he was already with God. When believers begin to pray from that place, from gratitude, trust, and assurance, everything changes. Prayer becomes less about anxiety and more about alignment, less about fear and more about faith, less about control and more about surrender. This does not guarantee immediate miracles, but it transforms the posture of the heart. The prayer Jesus prayed before miracles teaches believers to approach God not as beggars, but as children, not as strangers, but as sons and daughters. Scripture says that through Christ, believers have been given the spirit of adoption, by which they cry, "Abba, Father." That intimacy is not symbolic, it is real, and it is meant to shape the way believers pray. This truth has often been overshadowed by tradition, fear of excess, or misunderstanding. The Church, in guarding against arrogance, has sometimes discouraged confidence. But confidence rooted in relationship is not arrogance. It is faith. Jesus' prayers were confident because his relationship with the Father was secure. He knew who he was, and he knew who God was. When believers pray with that same assurance, they are not claiming power for themselves. They are acknowledging God's faithfulness. Giving thanks before seeing change is not presumption. It is trust. Speaking with confidence is not arrogance. It is agreement with God's character. This does not mean every prayer will result in a miracle. Jesus himself prayed prayers that led to the cross. Faith does not eliminate suffering, but it reframes it. It anchors the believer in the knowledge that God is present, purposeful, and good, even when outcomes are unclear. The prayer Jesus prayed before miracles invites believers into a deeper way of praying. Jesus, will always with you, my child. I bless you. A way that begins with gratitude, a way that assumes God's nearness, a way that rests in relationship rather than striving for results. It is not a formula to manipulate God. It is a posture that aligns the heart. Imagine how prayer would change if believers truly believed God was already listening, if they thanked him before seeing answers, if they spoke to him as a loving father rather than a distant judge, if they prayed from faith instead of fear. That shift alone could transform spiritual lives. This is not new teaching. It is ancient. It is ancient. It is ancient. It is found in the words of Jesus himself, yet it has often been overlooked, minimized, or misunderstood. The Church has not forgotten this prayer intentionally. It has simply emphasized other aspects of faith more strongly. But now, perhaps, it is time to rediscover it. The prayer Jesus prayed before miracles is not about changing God's mind. It is about trusting God's heart. It is not about demanding outcomes. It is about deepening relationship. It is not about certainty of results. It is about certainty of God's presence. As believers return to this kind of prayer, they may find that their faith grows even when circumstances do not change immediately. They may discover peace that surpasses understanding. They may experience intimacy with God that reshapes their lives. And sometimes, yes, they may witness miracles, not because they mastered a technique, but because they trusted a Father. In a world filled with anxiety, noise, and fear, this prayer posture offers something radical. It offers rest. It invites believers to stop striving and start trusting, to stop begging and start believing, to stop questioning God's nearness and start living from it. Jesus did not pray like someone unsure of God's attention. He prayed like someone who knew the Father intimately, and that knowledge changed everything. It shaped his words, his actions, and his miracles. It can do the same for believers today. Perhaps the greatest miracle is not what happens around us, but what happens within us when we learn to pray like Jesus. When gratitude replaces fear, when trust replaces doubt, when relationship replaces ritual, that transformation alone is powerful. The prayer Jesus prayed before miracles is still available. It has not been lost. It has been waiting, quietly, patiently, for believers to rediscover it. And when they do, prayer will no longer feel like shouting into the void, but like speaking to a Father who has always been listening.